I just played every Game of the Year award winner ever, just to see if they still hold up since the first one was awarded all the way back in 2014. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Game Awards have been around for longer than 10 years. Some of you guys might remember when they were on Spike TV back in the day. But today, we're just focusing on the modern Game Awards, the ones we've anticipated every year since Advanced Warfare was released. And stay tuned to the end of this video where we'll discuss this year's nominees and who you want to win this year's Game of the Year award. And with that out of the way, let's get to our first title. When I first read about the Dragon Age series, I had no idea there could be so much charm and depth to an RPG. The only RPGs I've ever gotten into were the Dark Souls series and Skyrim, which is why I feel like I missed out on gold with Dragon Age Inquisition. I might get some hate for this, but as a first-time player, this felt like a cross between Baldur's Gate 3 and Skyrim. Yes, I know, Baldur's Gate 3 came out way later, but that style of game is something I hadn't played until this past year. The ability to slow down time and interact in battle using each character, targeting them on different enemies and using their abilities all at once is something I'm not used to, but very much enjoyed. The game immediately sucked me in with the all-too-familiar plot of you are a prisoner and no one likes you, but hey, you've got a special ability that can save the world. I also immediately felt chest pains with each and every disappointment I caused for Cassandra. My shameless need for approval and desire to be liked was being exploited by the developers. I loved having the ability to jump whenever I wanted, which is something I feel like we don't see a lot of in most RPGs these days. The charming action movie style introductions for different characters were alluring and felt so natural that I hardly noticed the difference between a dialogue-based interaction and the main journey we were on. It was seamless. The immersion from the environment as we chased after the big glowing green hole in the sky called the Rift was incredible. I felt like I had a small army with me that could take on the world, and we did. Another little thing that really tickled my ADD brain is the lack of random NPC dialogue. While I do love being able to construct a story from talking to random characters that don't seem pertinent to the plot, I also find it very overwhelming and often get paralyzed by choice when I'm forced to talk to everyone. It's the main reason why I didn't do too many side quests or read any of the books in Skyrim. It was just too much information. Oh, and also the skill trees. They were much simpler in this game than other RPGs I've played, which again is something I can appreciate because it gives the illusion of choice, but less choice, meaning there's more time to play the game and less time to stress over building the perfect character. Knowing how much fun I had playing this game, I now want to go back and play the whole series just to get the full picture, which might make a pretty good video. The lore itself is insane. Apparently in the Dragon Age universe, conflicts, kingdoms, and countries have waxed and waned over 9 centuries, 900 years. There's a whole caste system, there's ancestral worship, the rise and fall of empires. It's almost too much to cover in this video, but I'll make it work when I cover the whole series. The fascinating thing about this game isn't just the lore, but the pitfalls in production that BioWare had to deal with. They made this game using the Frostbite engine created by DICE, and back in 2011 when they started development, they had to cut corners a lot because apparently they ran into numerous tech issues with old hardware. Yeah, if you remember the Red Ring of Death, how's your back pain? Your joints hurt? You want a little Bengay for your ailments? I should clarify, this is the third installment in the series. BioWare's goal was to recover from their lackluster second game, Dragon Age 2, which was kind of a flop. It seems people didn't care for the lack of simplicity compared to the first one, so they stepped it up. And man, did they. I had a blast playing Dragon Age Inquisition and intend to play more, especially since they just dropped the Veilguard, which seems pretty popular so far. But what do you think? Is the new one worth it? Does it also deserve Game of the Year like Inquisition did? While you comment below, let's move on to our next best series sequel, The Witcher 3. Now, while I do enjoy watching Henry Cavill walk around shirtless and kill people, I also love being able to immerse myself in one of the best-selling video games of all time. This game has sold over 50 million copies and has over 200 awards. And for good reason. I was immediately roped in with the immersive storyline, great dialogue and voice acting, plus having a trusty steed like Roach to carry you everywhere was a nice touch. The combat took some getting used to as I almost got eaten alive by wolves because I kept accidentally pulling out my torch for some reason, but it did feel fluid and natural once I got the hang of it. The card game I found in one of the bars in the first quest was interesting. It felt a bit like Yu-Gi-Oh! But with medieval characters instead of dripped-out billionaires and Egyptian pharaohs. I also really liked the immediately noticeable character development. The dialogue options weren't too overwhelming and showed more to Geralt than I expected. Something about hearing him threaten or intimidate peasants was just So satisfying. An interesting fact I learned while researching this game was how long it took for CD Projekt Red to develop Witcher 3. They started production in 2008, but had a bunch of delays as they were focusing on other projects. But still, nearly 8 years of production and $81 million went into this, and it paid off. Speaking of money, supposedly GTA 6 has cost over $1 billion, and it's been in production since before some of you were born. So hopefully there's a linear connection there. That's how that works, right? You throw money at the thing and it does well automatically. Anyway, the point is, the passion is clear, the visuals are stunning, the combat is fluid. It proves that sequels are always better, which is something I've said for years. Just Cause 2 was better than Just Cause. Dark Souls 3 was better than 2. There's no way to mess up a sequel, right? Yeah. Look, Overwatch 2 is a lesson in franchise management. I've played Overwatch since 2018. Yes, I realized I missed out on the golden era of Overwatch, I get it. But it was great back then. And you guys might kill me for saying this, but I still don't mind Overwatch 2, especially since they brought back classic 6v6. It's not perfect. It's a bit like calling an ex after you both moved to different states and have different careers and new friends, and now you're just trying to capture an inkling of the good old days. Sure, it's fun for a bit, but some things need to be left in the past. The heyday of Overwatch is long gone. It was a fantastic team-based shooter that offered hours of fun and replayability, but as time progresses, things must change. Especially if you're a developer that decides to sabotage your own product. That doesn't change the facts though. The original was incredible. People's careers were made from this game. I'm not sure we'd know who Tim the Tatman was if it wasn't for Overwatch.
I played Overwatch for a very long time. I played classic Overwatch the first time it ever came out, Overwatch 1. I loved it, bro. A lot of people say that Overwatch made me. It made me. You know what I'm saying?
Whew, okay, we're back to playing the good sequels again. Whew. Now, I'm a little embarrassed to say this. This was my first time playing a Zelda game. I know. I have a copy of Ocarina of Time, and I've never touched it. But that's why I make videos like this, so that I can experience great games and give you guys an excuse not to pay attention in class or slack off on work or whatever it is you're doing. And speaking of great games, dude, I had no idea how expansive this game was. I've watched others play it for years and never really got the hype until I realized this is a pretty in-depth game. The aim mechanics threw me off a little bit at first, but I did get the hang of it after nearly dying a few times in the beginning. Then I finally understood the brilliance behind the puzzle mechanics and found myself mesmerized by the creativity involved. Apparently this game is so massive compared to previous Nintendo projects that it takes 193 hours to fully complete. That is insane. It's even more impressive when you consider this was developed in the span of only 5 years. 5 years in game development is not that long. This is also including at least 2 years worth of setbacks, so once again, very impressive. My wife loves this game and has given me hell over not playing it, and I completely understand. What I don't understand is how I waited so long to play this next game of the year.
Red boy.
I owe so many of you an apology for not playing this sooner. God of War is a full cinematic experience. You gotta understand, I came from the Soulsborne series, mainly Dark Souls 1 through 3, so full interactive stories with camera angles like this are foreign to me and mind-blowing to look at. I love the incorporation of Atreus in some of the boss fights. I think it's a brilliantly creative way to keep things from feeling so linear. But the coolest thing I experienced was the weapon usage. The combat is fantastic. With each parry and block, I could feel the goosebumps on my skin. And even though I died well before the first boss, I still found myself sitting on the edge of my seat to focus on each and every altercation. Oh yeah, and recalling Kratos' axe is so satisfying. The cutscenes offer nice breaks in between combat as well, because I needed a breather with every time I found myself trapped between enemies or nearly getting smashed to bits or dealing with this annoying little shit. Simple. God of War is amazing. It's gorgeous, engaging, and perfectly fluid between boss fights and cutscenes, but I've still got a soft spot for the next game on our list. This has got to be the most grueling Souls game I have ever played, and I love it. I played Sekiro a few years back for about 4 hours, got demolished by anything and everything, and called it a day. But I kept coming back. There's something about Soulsborne games that have an irresistible charm and seduction to them, or maybe I'm just a masochist, but that means everyone else is too. There have been a number of studies on the effects of Dark Souls on clinical depression, and the results are surprising. It's been found that the unrelenting punishment of a game that never lets you change the difficulty can be very beneficial for your mental health. The process of grinding your way to a boss only to get destroyed and having to do it again and again until you get it is a way to build confidence, resilience, and even a little patience. Well, maybe not patience, but you get the idea. Sekiro is a reminder to players that not every game needs to be for every player, because a game for everyone is a game for no one. The fighting mechanics, the grappling abilities, parrying, it is all so satisfying. Plus, you get to feel like a samurai for a while and get sucked into this brutal universe as you climb your way through the ranks. It's obvious that this game got what it deserved in 2019. And then there's the sequel to The Last of Us. So this is a little embarrassing. While recording The Last of Us 2, my laptop crashed and torched my footage. But that's not going to stop the conversation. We will press on. This game is arguably the most controversial title to win Game of the Year. While it has received positive reviews overall, I kept finding split opinions all over the internet. A massive number of people praised the skillful design and storytelling with unexpected plot twists that I won't spoil, while others want the dev team's heads to be mounted on the wall for others to enjoy. I will admit, I'm inclined to agree with the sentiment that there's too much heavy-handed moral agenda pushing and it does get tiresome, but that doesn't stop the game from being an excellent sequel. Game of the Year? Maybe not. Culturally significant and worth playing? Absolutely. This game is yet another solid sequel. Speaking of terrible twos, let's talk about what it takes to... Let's talk about taking on... What am I trying to say? It Takes Two. I am a huge fan of games that require cooperation with a partner. There's something about the concentrated effort of two big brains working together that just...
This is a fucking vacuum cleaner. What the is your problem?
Is this vacuum cleaner from Fallujah? Like, what is this?
What the fuck? Oh, penis! Don't you dare spank me.
All right, maybe that was a bad example. It Takes Two is brilliant in many ways, and it somewhat reminds me of the We Were Here series, all of which are equally clever, but this game takes it to another level. The split screen mechanic took some time to get used to, but eventually became more of an asset than anything else. The creative brilliance of being two parents turned into toys who have to mend their marriage while being lectured by a Hispanic book of love, which feels a little on the nose, by the way, is something I haven't seen replicated yet. Having to team up and use nails and a hammer to navigate the massive landscape was fascinating. This game felt like Toy Story on steroids. And then it turned into Toy Story on PTSD.
Oh my god! Ew! Oh my god!
This just went from a kid's game to like a Soulsborne. This is hard. This is hard.
Holy shit.
While I'm very impressed with It Takes Two and will not argue that it deserved to win in 2021, if it won just a single year later, we would have a problem. Like I was saying about Soulsborne games earlier, they are all equally brilliant. Each one has its own unique twist on the cursed world of the undead, but Elden Ring demolished its own competition. Imagine making a game so good that people forgot about your other greatest hits. Okay, so forgot might be an extreme word to use, but let's be real. People who have never touched a Souls game got into this one. I have so many coworkers that got into Elden Ring when it came out that I was kind of worried that FromSoft sold out. And I was never so happy to be proven wrong. I love the open world aspect of the game that lets you make mistakes, in particular running into Caleb without knowing what sort of nightmare hellscape it actually was. The scale of the world is insane. The enemies are abusive, but fair? Yeah, they're fair. It's just a skill issue. It cannot be overstated how amazing Elden Ring really is, but what's even more amazing is how its own DLC is up for Game of the Year. What? Imagine making a game that is not only a global sensation, bringing in new players that have never even touched your genre before, then winning Game of the Year, then possibly doing it again with DLC content alone. That is insane. Which, if anything, is proof that game companies are kind of slacking these days. It seems like every company is afraid of risk. Nobody wants to roll the dice and see what happens. Which reminds me. Man, was this a different experience for me. One of my friends bought this game for me a while back to play on stream, and it confused me at first because it's not really my style, but that quickly changed. The top-down view of things was very puzzling at first, and having to click to move a lot was odd but livable. I did get used to it pretty soon, though. The turn-based combat was interesting and felt a lot like Dragon Age Inquisition. See? Everything comes full circle. I told you I'd bring it back around. had to trust me. The story depth for each character made this intimidating at first, but I learned to adapt. I was fascinated with the dialogue mechanics and looking for every opportunity to roll that D20 for that sweet, sweet dopamine hit. If more companies put this much effort into their games, it would be like the 2000s all over again. Just banger after banger after banger. And we probably wouldn't hate games as much as we do now. But that being said, who did you pick for your game of the year? Let's talk about that. Astrobot seems to have some serious hype behind it, and I can't argue with that. The graphics, the gameplay, the homage to older games of my childhood, it appears to have everything. We briefly touched on the passion missing from game devs that we often saw in the early 2000s, and this is exactly what I was talking about. The movement, the environment, it all reminds me of platformers from when I was a kid. So I gotta be honest, Astrobot is one hell of a contender this year. Now, for the next game, I'm going to tread lightly because I know how dedicated fans are with these types of games. Metaphor ReFantasio has gotta have the weirdest name I have ever heard, but I can see why people like it. The flashy effects, snappy combat, the soundtrack. If this is your shtick, I get it. It's just not for me. Yet another franchise I do want to be careful with, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I have a friend that loves the Final Fantasy series, and it seems to be a very niche thing. I haven't met too many fans of Final Fantasy that also play FIFA, COD, Forza. They tend to stick with this style, which I completely get. This game seems more cinematic than others I've enjoyed, but also insanely immersive. I can see why players would feel like they're the main character instead of just controlling one. Incredible graphics, gorgeous cutscenes, no cringy dialogue. Definitely worth the hype. And then there's Black Myth Wukong. Now, we've already covered my opinion on Soulsborne games, so it's only appropriate that I'm biased towards Souls-like games. But I think this game does a fantastic job of roping you in immediately with this ridiculous battle scene that sets the tone from the start. Then there's the combat, which feels like God of War, but a bit more fluid. And of course, the environment is nuts. And I gotta admit, this feels like a direct competitor to Astrobot. And despite my biases, I don't know that the Elden Ring DLC can compete. Shadow of the Erdtree is easily some of the best DLC content we've seen in recent years. There is no argument there. New bosses, new landscapes, 40 plus hours of content for the same game, all for $40, which is pretty nuts considering we're in the era of $70 plus games. As I said earlier, large game developers just aren't putting in the effort that they used to and are milking players dry if given the opportunity. While I do think this DLC is fascinating and it's a testament to FromSoft's dedication to its players, I don't think it can win. Here's why. If Shadow of the Erdtree wins, I think it's blasphemous to the title of Game of the Year. While the facts page does explain that DLC can win, these awards are more about the best games of 2024 and years prior. Can a DLC, which is an expansion of an existing game, really be considered Game of the Year? For you Skyrim fans out there, should Dawnguard be considered separate from Skyrim? Should Lego Fortnite be considered separate from Fortnite? If you can't play the DLC without the base game, is it really worth being crowned Game of the Year? Let me know why in the comments below. I've been your host, Sponge, and if you like this content, leave a like on the video, hit that sub button, and consider becoming a member to support the sync. And while we're at it, here's everybody that made this video possible.